a warm welcome to this session. My name is Alok Shukla, and I'm going to talk about productizing GenAI from multimodal capabilities to enterprise-grade guardrails. First of all, thanks to the nasscom for providing this platform to connect with DeepTech minds. Myself and my friend Sriraja will emphasize on the fact that productizing GenAI is not just about building the smart system. It is about how we leverage this for creating the business value securely, safely, and at a scale. So enterprise intelligence is evolving, and we have to now go beyond the hype. There's a need to build customized LLMs, which can be robust with the governance and as well as ready for AI culture. This transformation goes from tools to platform. There's a need to build unified AI platforms which are scalable, adaptable, and can help the workflow automation. Intelligence is at the heart of the product, and agentic automation is the next future. Today, the AI has become the new UI, and not only the way we interact, but also how the information flows in the industry. At the heart of this is the power of multimodalities. By combining multiple modalities like images, video, text, and other modalities, we can actually empower the system to provide deeper and more meaningful insights. The multimodal transformation is at the frontier, and this can help to make us more improper and enhanced decision making. Now, when we adopt the GenAI for the enterprise, we have the core is building the trust. And for that, it is important for us to basically block the harmful content, biases, PIIs, as well as have the hallucination checks, and enforce the compliance to the heart. With this, we will be able to build a system which will be multimodal, have guardrails, and agentic. So the future of building the intelligent enterprise lies with multimodal, secure, and agentic framework. Thank you so much. Now my friend Sriraja will introduce this concept with a case study, how it actually gets deployed in an industry. Yeah, over to you, Sriraja.
Thanks. Thanks, Alok. Before I get started, and thanks for the nice concepts. I mean, it's really difficult, really important to go with some of these key principles and takeaways if you want to squeeze out more out of what our AI solutions and capabilities can develop. It'd be really good if you can just give an example of, or examples of where Samsung as an organization is taking these forward. I mean, obviously we know and we have experienced these in our devices that we use, but where are we headed?
Yeah, thanks, Sriraja, for this question. So Samsung, as you know, is the front runner in AI innovation. So we have created Galaxy AI as a brand. With all, we are actually incubating AI in our foundational OS systems, and giving a very foundational or fundamental changes, how do we interact with the technology. To give an examples, there are agentic and multimodal systems available in our smartphones. Some examples are live translations. So now, which kind of overcomes the language barriers in the world. We have smart suggestions, AI select, which improves the productivity. We have features like AI draw assist, AI photo assist, which improves the creativity of our consumers. So we are actually going through this transformation where the AI is becoming the integral part of our product and ecosystem. Not only in our product, at our organization also, in every workflow, we are actually going through our AI transformation from software development to processes to HR policies. We are AI driven. So that's where I think we are seeing a large transformation happening in the industries as well as in Samsung. Thank you.
Thanks, Alok. I'll now, I can take the clicker. I'll not just give a quick overview, whistle-stop tour, if I may, in terms of how we actually go ahead and deploy AI solutions in the enterprise. What do we do? What kind of gotchas do we face? Again, probably 5-10 minutes is too small to cover all of these things, but I'll try to do my best, right? So this is a case study, but before we get into that, right, this is something that everybody is familiar with. Whenever we go ahead and take a solution, we start to look at requirements. We kind of try to find out what the business wants, right? And typically, these are the things that you eventually get to list down before you start developing. I agree, and probably everybody is familiar with it. You don't get all of these things in the first shot, but eventually you try to nail these down because these are your requirements that you try to fulfill before you go ahead and create the solution, right? These are tangible, these are explicit, right? These are measurable, right? You want to know what kind of performance you have, you want to know what kind of requirements you have. There are some of them subjective, but you try to nail them down because at the end of the day, you have to say that you finished the job. But then, if you have to develop a solution, there are some of these things that you need to do in terms of the solution needs to have, and this is what I call as the want versus the need. Right? There are some wants that the business wants that need to be created that you have to develop, but then there are some of these needs. And coming from a bank, we have some of these regulatory concerns. The customer data is almost at the top. Maintaining that privacy is almost at the top of it. You cannot, for any means, by any means, miss that out. In fact, I was thinking about it. For one of the examples that we had to solve, we did not get to see the developers internally could not get the customer data. What we instead got was a couple of teams from the business who we were working on conversational data. So these are two people who had a simulated conversation amongst each other and shared us the data and say, hey, this is what a sample data looks like. This is exactly what we got. But that tells you what kind of level of privacy has to be maintained. It also means that if you're looking at, we also need to build out bias is an important factor, explainability is an important factor that we need to go ahead and look at, and some of the other ones. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them. Now, the case study that I'm talking about is a conversational summarization. From a use case perspective, again, the wants are you have customers talking to us as a bank, and they have these conversations with banking agents. The ask is to summarize those conversations. Now, if you look at it as a use case per se, and we wanted to use LLMs because everybody wants to use LLMs, everybody wants to get the greatest summaries. So you go ahead, you have these conversations, you do a transcription, you take those transcriptions, and then pass them through summarization. You put in some kind of backups in case the summaries don't work. You have some ML models. You pass them through a database, and you have a dashboard, right? Life's so simple. Well, this is what we really had to build out. In addition to all of those things, you have to build out a module to manage the data. You have to build out a module to manage the model performance and track it and keep looking at it. From a risk perspective, you have to make sure of multiple things. You have to make sure that your model does not have a bias. So you have to have bias checking. You have to have a hallucination checking. You have to check for the content moderation. You have to make sure, because your conversations, they're not controllable. Anybody could go ahead and say anything. You have to make sure that your outputs are reasonable, your inputs are reasonable, and so all of those things have to be controlled. You have to make sure that you are capturing feedback. You have to make sure so you are actioning on those things. You have to make sure that your outputs are explainable. All of those things have to be factored in, right? Now, okay, you go ahead, you build all those things, but that's where just the fun just starts, because you've built everything, and then a whole bunch of things, the new things that come in. You have to constantly monitor how your operations are going. You have to monitor how your data is being tracking. You have to monitor and making sure that you don't have any access leakage, you don't have any data leakages. You cannot, so essentially, you have to control for unintended consequences as well, right? You have to control for things like what happens if a developer gets hold of a data, even if it is inadvertent. Now, one of the things specifically in our solution that we had to call out and we had to maintain is we used OpenAI models. We had an agreement with OpenAI. That means that our data was reasonably promised to be secure and not shared for updates. So that is something we were happy with. But what it meant is every 6 months, the OpenAI model gets deprecated. Now, if you are a user of a solution, they don't want to see different things every 6 months. Now, we all know the data is different and your model is going to change. What do you do then? So we had to build out essentially a whole set of process and parameters to make sure that that update is seamless and we are managing. We don't want to spend 3 months of development every 6 months, right? You have to make sure that this kind of gets taken care of automatically. Right. This is just a snapshot of what it's been running. So this is a solution, as I said, it's been running for nearly 10 plus months. We have this running on a daily basis. We have around 2,500 calls per week. We've gone through 2 model version upgrades that I mentioned. This started off for one solution business. It's been scaled for others. For those of you who are interested in the technical details, we actually had a paper on this in the recently concluded ACL conference. I have the link here, and I'm happy to end this conversation. Thank you at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Sriraja. So quite an interesting case study. And as you mentioned that the few important challenges while we deploy GenAI enterprises, data security, privacy, as well as governance. So in your industry, can you give some example, how do you ensure that these governance are and the compliances are taken care?
Sure, thanks. So data security, and I'll start with an example of what we mean by data security and governance, right? So one is obviously access is one of the things, right, from a data perspective. And in this case of a conversation summarization, the data, I mean, if I am an advisor or an agent who has had a conversation with a customer, only I can have a viewership of that summary and that conversation. Even if my colleague who is an agent, they cannot have a look at it unless the customer has been transferred to them. So it's that level of scrutiny what we do. What we do is also, even names are becoming sensitive because I cannot even use names in the conversation. So what we do, things like, is we actually do PII masking beforehand. Before looking at the, obviously we don't look at the transcripts, but we employ and remove PII information or anonymize the names, anonymize a lot of keywords that would probably tie, even if they creep into a conversation, that would tie the conversation to an individual, and then send it back to the summary, and then re-anonymize or repopulate the actual name so that before it is visible to the agent who are consuming it in a downstream manner. From a governance perspective, we have strict model governance policies. We are forced to provide evidences of bias, of having mitigated bias, of having maintained and met unintended consequences. So essentially, answering or proving evidences of what if kind of questions. What happens if somebody got hold of this? What happens if somebody had an access of it? Have to kind of prove all those things before we go ahead and get an approval. Thanks. Maybe it's time to open up the to the floor for questions. If there are any, I'm happy. If somebody has questions, maybe they can come over and answer.
Hi, I'm Ramesh. So you said every 3 months there could be a model version change and you have to do some kind of reworking, right? So you might have your knowledge base based on model version 1. And if you have to train the existing knowledge base again with the model version 2, what are the techniques that you have applied?
So I mean, in many of these cases, the answer is to go with common sense because, I mean, I hate to burst the bubble, so there is the best way to work with common sense. So what we do is create some standard metrics, right? That in terms of saying, have a reference data, create some metrics, so you have results on that reference data based on those, I mean, you have metrics on that reference data on your first or initial version. Then you look into it, and when you have a new version coming up or changing it, you try it out on the same metric. You find out what has changed. Try to solve for systematic changes. Now, there is going to be two kinds of changes that are going to be. One is systematic, as in a change is appearing. For example, if you're looking at summaries, suddenly you might start seeing a whole bunch of numerical values in the new summary, right? That may be required, that may not be required. What do you want to, so that's a systematic change. The other thing could be some kind of, again, a random change which is slightly harder to control, but at least you can fix those systematic changes, right? So that's what we do.
Any more questions from the audience?
Alok, I did have another question to you on in terms of you touched upon some of the key takeaways, and I think the one that kind of stuck with me was the multimodal capability as well, right? So where do you see and what do you see are the advantages that we can get out of multimodal? Because we are not seeing many solutions at least that are popularized, which make use of those multimodal capabilities?
Sure, I think this is a very important question. And let me briefly give the answer with an example. So for example, if we are talking about the insurance companies, and let's say a consumer met with an accident, and now he has his damaged car, right? Now with multimodal capabilities, what consumer has to do is he has to just take some samples, take some captures, take some videos of the damage, what it has happened to the car, make some input text or the voice notes, and then feed this all multiple data to a large LLM or the multimodal network, right? Now, with these multimodal capabilities, within a fraction of time, these multimodals can actually estimate the cost involved for the repair, which will actually take a larger time when it has to happen through a manual process. So that's the advantage of bringing these multiple modalities together. This always the more information, better insights, and more contextual insight we can get by combining different modalities of data together and train the model in a multimodal way. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. I mean, the other thing that I got reminded of while you were talking is, I see that is a lot of people, or there are a lot of organizations who are trying to look up in terms of it's being used in interviewing as well, right? I see that trying to read emotions of candidates, trying to see from the video of their interviewing, trying to see how they are doing. Of course, it's being used both ways. Let's also, and I think everybody is familiar with that in terms of people trying to use the multimodal capabilities both to support the interviewing process as well as evaluation process. So I think that's something that's getting prevalent that's something that we are seeing.
So right now, the generative models have become so powerful that it's hard to distinguish what is real and what is unreal, right? And that's where I think these governance, these matrices, and the ethical AI will play a very important role. And as a sensible AI engineers, we need to be assured that we are having the complete power or complete control on the AI, and at any instant of time, we are not giving control to the AI. That's, I think, is very important. And with that note, I think we end this conversation. Thank you so much for your time, and it was a pleasure talking to you all. Oh, yes.
Thank you both, Alok and Sriraja,
There
for
is
that
a
grounded
question.
and
Can we?
So, Sriraja, you talked about the use case wherein you are taking summary of a conversation and you are storing it. And you also talked about obfuscating the data because only the operator should know what it was talked about. But is it a case for real-time understanding for the operator itself or for later consumption? If it is for later, then if you are obfuscating the information, how would you actually use that?
So that's a good question. So yeah, obviously the data is stored somewhere. What we do is we control access, right? So the access control is maintained so that only you can probably access your information or the information that is relevant to you, and that's how we kind of maintain it. From other, I mean, obviously, in terms of that seems to be the easiest solution. We can't really go ahead and do that. In terms of development, what I mentioned was the fact that developers by themselves are not allowed access to or to view or download data which is present in those databases or wherever they are involved. So we've kind of taken care of it from an engineering perspective. All right, thanks.